What's up and welcome to the Fervent 4. Did you know that only 4% of businesses ever cross the annual $1 million revenue mark? Hello, I'm Zack Miller, author of Anomaly. With me today, I'm my co-host Tim Ryan, lead man at StartWheel.org. Thank you so much for joining us. The Fervent 4 is a weekly show each and every Thursday at 11 a.m. dedicated to sharing insights to growing a world-class business, no matter the climate. Bay McLaughlin is the COO and co-founder at Brinc, a venture accelerator, writing 50 to 500K checks to companies all around the globe. Bay, question.
What's going on?
So you have the smallest prosthetic in your head, and somehow 2 shark attacks happened. Is there a coincidence with that? Like, it seems to me when I read that, I was like, okay, so this thing in his noggin is producing these sharks coming to him. No coincidence. No, like it's
No, well, I always ask people, I give them the benefit of the doubt saying, do you want the real story or do you want the really cool story? So, I have some huge theory of, or story in my head of how cool it would be to make this big narrative. But realistically speaking, your mom or someone when you were a child told you, don't use Q-tips, and I literally just had a Q-tip in my ear and I thought it'd be more efficient because I'm a little bit of a ridiculous person like that to have one in the other ear so I didn't have to put it back in. So I was out my other ear and I was in my closet packing for the day of sports. I turned, hit the wall, and then just shattered all the ear bones on the right side of my head. So I had quite a few surgeries.
Cool story, though.
It's called a stapedectomy. So it's the smallest. It's like the size of a tip of a pencil lead. They take some deep tissue from the other side of your ear, and then they go in and they replace and bypass all the 3 bones that I shattered in my ear to try to give you some hearing back. So I don't think it's putting out some sort of signal. I don't think there's any processor in there. At least it didn't tell me. And the shark attacks, certainly, thank goodness, knock on wood, they were not attacks, but I had a tiger shark in a wave I was in where my friend got out and I didn't. At the Gold Coast in Australia when I studied there as a junior, that was freaking scary. And then got just some black tip reef sharks down in Costa Rica, so it wasn't as scary as the tiger shark, but no attacks, just close encounters.
Tiger sharks are the really, really, really big ones, right?
No, that's whale shark.
Well,
yeah, big, right, yeah, sure. In terms of the attack ones, yeah. Great whites, tigers, and bulls are just they're really not fun. So nice, good that they're out there. Don't want to be around them.
Wow,
man, what? I just want to dive in. I've been waiting for this. Really happy to have you on the show. How did you get into? Talk to us about your background. How did you get into the game? How did you co-found Brinc?
Well, I like to say, especially from being from Hampton Roads, born and raised in Virginia Beach, having gone to school here, then William & Mary for 5 years for 2 degrees in Williamsburg. I don't know, I have a bit of a chip in my shoulder in terms of this narrative because after I finished my master's, I went straight to Silicon Valley. I studied business. I actually started studying marine biology and realized that you actually have to sit in the lab and you don't get to surf and swim with dolphins your whole professionally when you get a marine biology degree. As 18-year-olds, super informed about the world, right? So anyways, got a business degree, really clicked. I was fortunate enough to get a job with Apple when I was a junior in college. So I worked for them for my senior and my master's years at William & Mary doing campus representative and sales for William & Mary, Vims, and Christopher Newport. So kind of got a bite of the apple of this innovation technology space, but really wasn't getting that itch scratched being around here or from here, and certainly not at William & Mary at the time, which they're doing a lot better. I like to push their buttons on that, but back when I was there, they didn't really have a lot of support for that type of personality. So got into my I picked up my best friend. I sold everything I owned and I drove cross country, and I slept on a couch with a friend of a friend in San Francisco, found a startup, and then the kind of rest is, history from there. I mean, certainly happy to dive in terms of the time in startups, building Apple's SMB division, some of the stuff I did for venture capitalists. But I think it was important for me, or it's important for me to continue to say that, especially for, now that I'm home, it's been awesome to be able to kind of connect with people. But this sort of narrative of, some things I kind of was frustrated by. One was when I decided to jump ship, not use my degrees and my studies to go to the West Coast and get into technology. I kid you not only my family, but multiple, older friends of the family would say, what are you doing? You have 2 degrees in accounting and business, and you have 43 of your classmates and your masters are getting these job offers at the Big Four, and you're the only one not taking it. What was the point, kind of thing? Like, this whole tech thing is, beyond. It's already happened. The bubbles happened. Like, what are you doing, right? And so it was just that general thought process, like, I gotta go. And so, I've been gone for 16 years now, and I've come back recently, but, happy to dive into exactly how the venture capital thing happened. But I also just like to, I don't know, I also like to let people know, like, some of that crap that I remember fighting as a kid, or growing up, like, one of those narratives I hated was this, like, sense that, like, you're born a founder, which we could probably get into that a little bit. Like, I have a real irritation with this, like, founder narrative, because I grew up with all military, fourth generation military, all teachers, like, very, blue collar, white collar type businesses. And or people around me had no exposure, right, to entrepreneurship, investing, venture capital. So I did not come from this world, which is actually one of the things I'm the most proud of in terms of our business at Brinc is, no billionaire backed us. We didn't come from some huge exit. Like, we bootstrapped our way, we picked ourselves up, and we've now become one of the world's largest early stage investors with no one believing in us. So that makes me, personally very happy.
So it's interesting that you're born and raised Virginia Beach. Tim is not from here; he's from Buffalo. I'm from DC. We're, what do they call us? Transplants, I guess. So it's interesting to me because I live this. I feel like most people move out of where they grew up, right? And so you're here. You moved away just like Tim and I did. Is that just something that as a kid at 24, 25, it sounds like, maybe even or younger than that, 22, that you're just like, screw it, I'm going to get away? Or was there something that you were actually seeing that was missing in this area that other places, the Valley specifically, I guess, had? Like, what was, I think you had said, you just didn't want to be here, you had to leave, but like, was there something that you saw missing that needed to be here? Is that thing here now? Where, paint a picture of the region of what you think it needed then and where it is kind of now.
Sure. So yeah, left at 22, like closer to the end, 22, almost 23, because I stayed for the Masters. But I mean, I can't speak about where everything was, but this was 2006, 7, right? And certainly the whole, like, this is, pre-iPhone, right? Like, the world was quite different. And so I was, I remember I was listening to a podcast the other day, Walt saying, like, the pre-iPhone world, get reporters to remember the time before that. And I remember being in Williamsburg and getting the very first Razor enabled by iTunes, like the first, phone that had iTunes in it. And I was freaking pumped. It was so cool. I loved it. And it wasn't, I don't know about Norfolk, Virginia Beach and other areas. I can at least tell you Williamsburg, being in the master's program with the Flex MBA students, was super exciting because I was with, like, much older people studying down in Hampton Roads every, 2 nights a week. And I was getting exposure to some real business, but it just felt super old school, right? Like, the business people, the case studies, the way the approach entirely just felt off. And also just one of those conversations that you just realize, like, once you spent any time. When I was at Apple, I was fortunate enough to go to the West Coast and, crash with some of the other Apple campus reps when I was 21, 22. And I mean, in one car ride, I remember going from Cupertino, because I was sleeping next door to campus at a friend's house, and, just driving into the city for one day. We're in this, drop top Corvette thing, whatever it was, I forget exactly, going up, the highway. And I mean, I was talking to people that were working on the craziest stuff, like, the camera in your MacBook back then, like the eyesight camera, if you remember, like the technology on that, and how it, like, super pumped they were about this, like, super minor thing that was like a mind blowing, how, like, a web, another person was working on the university division, and like, just listening to all these people at Apple was just like, where am I? Like, these people are so excited, they're so motivated, like, and I wasn't getting that anywhere, right, from where I was. And so
really innovating the world of things that are going to be used by potentially everyone in the world type of stuff.
And I'm sure there's stuff that I wasn't exposed to as a 21, 22-year-old in college, right? Let's be honest. Like, you don't really look much further than your, the bar and your fraternity and like, what's going on within that little town, where you can get on your bike or skateboard or whatever you're doing. And so like, it wasn't like, I was like digging in, looking necessarily. From what I'm told, it wasn't here, but I could at least say that within the context of like my friends and family, the people around me in the business school and everything else, I felt like I was the only one thinking about this, the only one talking about it, right? And so I knew I had to go. And there's some other kind of like, you'll both probably get this, but I think that I remember a couple of other elements that I just got super irritated when I would go to other campuses or other events. And it was always first thing first was, where'd you go to school? What are you doing for a business? Like, what's your job? Like, who's your family? Like all this shit that I'm just like, I just don't care. Like that makes no sense to me. And the first question in San Francisco was always like, what are you into? Right? Like, like not where you come from, it's where you're going. And like, that was so distinct to me. And it was like, this is so fundamentally different, right? Like I am not interested in continuing to credentialize myself.
I don't feel like that's changed here. I feel like that's still...
I'm sure, I actually don't think that has. I think that's an East Coast thing. But I remember thinking to myself, like, that's not the conversation I'm trying to have. Right. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but it was, very clear to me that I needed to go west. And it seemed like San Francisco because the Apple thing, and then it all kind of just took off from there. But in terms of what you were asking, in terms of where are we now, I've come back for a year and a half now for COVID, because we have young children, and we actually had our second child here, which wasn't the plan. But I am super impressed with a lot of things. I think there's a lot that has to be done. So I'm happy to get into that. But I'm not sure where the regional listening ship to this or not, whether it's, very Hampton Roads or Virginia or not. But I think Hampton Roads has come a really long way. And I think there's some really exciting stuff happening. It's black and white, night and day different, than what are very involved. And so I love being able to go to assembly in Norfolk, right? And like you meet up with a bunch of people and both mentor and take meetings. I love being able to go to, I was in DC, just 2 nights ago for a dinner, talking about Chinese technology and getting a, invite to go sit with like a think tank of people working on that in Richmond and Williamsburg for homecoming, and then having a bunch of meetings with other, angel investors. And it's like, there's stuff going on for sure, which is exciting.
So then, hold on, Tim. So just to piggyback off that, do you think then that these cities should, even though they're 3.5 hours apart, should work together more as a Virginia as the East Coast type of thing, instead of just as a specific city? Or how do you kind of envision that? Because it seems like you did just mention the 3 major cities areas in Virginia. Do you look at that as, and you could even potentially add Baltimore into that if you go up another hour? Is that kind of the Bay Area style where it takes 4 hours to get to those things anyway? So you just look at it that way? Or how do you kind of look at that from not just, Hampton Roads, the 757 area, Richmond as its own, DC as its own? Where do you see that as kind of fitting in? Because to me, all 3 of those areas are competing against each other, and really DC is probably the one that's crushing everyone.
Yeah, well, DC is obviously the only real, no offense, like the real city, right? That's pretty
right,
clear.
Of course.
Like, you can't really argue that.
Do people actually argue that? Because I really think that would be hilarious. Like,
well, so I'll tell you this much. I mean, besides not getting into the politics of it all, I think that the thing that I don't understand, which I see all the time, 2 things. Almost everything here is not for profit. That makes no sense. Like, full stop. Like, that's important to have, and it's great. Every place in the world that we build offices that we've invested in, they have some sort of non-dilutive, not for profit kind of thing for startups. That's great, super important. But then around that is a much bigger for-profit sector, that support startups and invest in startups, which is severely lacking, which I think we all can appreciate. I think that creates a byproduct, which I think is also kind of hard to argue, that exists here, which is a scarcity mindset. And everyone seems to still be sort of slowly, like in front of the camera, they're saying, we're working together. Behind the camera, there's elbows out, right? And I've seen it, constantly. And so, but it's not, it's not any individual's fault, because literally they're all fighting for the same grant money, right? They're all fighting for the same kind of teams and talent. And so it's not a surplus mentality. It's always about scarcity. And that's by the design of a not-for-profit, government-backed system. Right?
Yeah, they get
If
their
there was
first check. It's always hard for them to get their second, third checks in theory, because they get started and then.
Like, it's just hard in general, right? Like anything that's government-backed is hard. So I think that this is one of those things, like one of my, I don't listen to him like I used to, but like what I love about, Gary Vee's perspective, it's always it's always more. And like, if you don't understand that, then you fundamentally do not understand how technology works. Like it is always going to be more and. So anytime that, I start feeling that around here, which is very often, and I've had it in dealings, in kind of back alley, kind of dealings that I get, chopped out of, which have happened since I've been back, which I think is pretty messed up. And also just like people's unwillingness to say how they feel, right? Just kind of like be honest, being like, hey, I'm threatened by this, or I'm concerned that you look competitive, or whatever it is. And that stuff, you can just have a conversation, right? Like I think that's another thing. It's sort of like the Southern gentleman, whatever culture of this is like being quiet and not being direct. And
but I do think a deeper piece to this is when you don't play that game and you do play in front of the camera, everything's great. Like no one wins in that, because no one gets over, right? And nothing actually gets built in that.
And I think there's like a slow coalition. Like I've been, trying my best to just have these conversations, right? Like I'm trying to be as direct as possible for the benefit of the long term. I think version 1 has been built, and I think it's great. I think it's been a fantastic version 1, DC excluded, right? That's a different game. And I think we need to start thinking about version 2. And I think that there's a lot that can be done. And I think, one element I'm trying to bring to the table and keep pushing people on is it has to be by definition for profit. And we have to make sure that we make money to survive, to continue to reinvest in this ecosystem and where we're strong, and protecting some of our gaps and our opportunities, because we definitely are vulnerable in quite a few ways as well. And I think that's going to happen inevitably, because this sort of, not-for-profit government-backed gravy train like cannot go on forever. And it gets harder and harder every next, iteration of whoever's in office, right? To keep that continuity and narrative. So eventually I think that hits a wall. So I think it's sort of inevitable either way.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've got to grow the pie. If that's business,
right?
For a terrible, yeah. I mean, it's
more and.
Exactly. I mean, and it all comes with sharing deal flow and helping founders grow and supporting the founders. I mean, all this stuff that we can do to grow the pie, share the deal flow, and everybody wins. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just, to me, it's just so blatantly obvious.
By the way, before we transition, which I think we're about to do, Tim, I had to, Zach, when he first came on, I was like, we first were talking backstage and your head was over here, and then you shift. I go, oh, there's The Rock. Hello. And then the intro happens, like the whole wrestling thing. I go, okay, now I get it. It's like, I was going to have to ask, but I got it.
There you go. Yeah. Look, I'm 37 years old and I still watch wrestling, and it's okay.
Dude, The Rock is the man.
The Rock is the man, but also like, I think Vince McMahon is a very underrated businessman. The guy turned basically a local circus into a multi-billion-dollar business. And maybe the biggest movie star of all time, or the most popular star of all time, that guy right there, it came out of him.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, good eye for talent.
Amazing eye for talent. Yeah. So, and now we transition.
I had to comment. It was like, it only took like the head to go like this. And I was like, different entire perspective right now. Like, yeah.
On these, I don't care about, but like sometimes I'll be on a call and I'll meet someone for the first time, and I'm just like, so how's it going? Like, what's happening? And I'm like, should I put a sheet behind it or something? Like, it's whatever. I mean,
don't
a friend, a viewer, bought that for me when I first moved into this office, and I was like, yeah, there's there's like some missing space there. I should get like a poster of The Rock and put it there. So it came. And then what was funny is that's not the poster I would have bought. I would not have bought The Rock half naked. I would have bought him, the fanny pack Rock picture. But
right. Well, now you got to get the Rock NFT, man, and load it up.
The Rock worked out at the gym downtown. Wow, that's crazy to think about.
I don't know.
That's what a viewer just wrote in. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't see other comments coming in here.
Yeah. But Facebook has this weird thing on StreamYard where if you're listening in one of our groups, it just says Facebook user, even though that's clearly not.
Well, my understanding is that must have been an early rock, because the rock that I know now travels with his private gem in his semi-trailers. So
it's ridiculous.
All right, Tim, let's keep going.
No, I was just curious. Like, one of the biggest complaints about this area that I hear from founders is there's not enough money. We need more access to capital. Is that something you hear? So Brinc is all over the world at multiple locations. Is that something that you hear at every location, or is that something that is specific that just a lot of people say it here in this region?
Well, I mean, it's really clear that there's a process and an evolution of how innovation ecosystems start to have that first kind of risk capital, which is what we normally would bring. I mean, and before us, it was Techstars, 500 startups, like whoever, right? Y Combinator, they stayed in the Valley and they sourced everyone to them, and they did not ever expand, right? They tried to chime in and they shut it down. So there's only been a few of us that have really said, hey, let's go out. And now there's a ton, right? I mean, in the US, at least, it's super prolific. But if you just look at, cities and you say, okay, what would have exited there, right? In the Hampton Roads, or sorry, I can't speak for all of it, but the things I know, right? You've got Landmark Communications, you've got Northrop, is it not Northrop Grumman? What's the other one? Starts with an N. You've got the Port, you've got
Newport News Shipbuilding.
Yeah, like you only have like 4 or 5 that were like big businesses, right?
Yeah, 4 Fortune 500 companies, give or take, every couple of years. Yeah,
and then those families invested in a ton of like real estate and philanthropy and whatever else, right? And not many of them have gotten into the super high risk, early stage venture tech, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if you look at the Valley, I mean, the Valley's in like what their
70th year.
But I was going to say generational. I'd say
it's fourth generation.
Fourth, or it could be even 6th if you look at it a different way. But let's say it's 4th, full cycle, right? Of companies get exited, boom, and plant seeds, and this has continued to happen, right? And then if you look in Europe is sort of completing their like 2nd, right? So though even Europe is still behind massively, right? China is probably starting their 2nd, right? And so if you just like use that as like a world kind of perspective, and then you zoom in further and then look at towns like in North America, you saw like the pops in the big cities, and then it went to like the Denvers, right? And then the Austins. I mean, Hampton Roads is not a logical place, right? And so I think that's where you see stuff like Rise of the Rest with Steve Case, which I love what they're doing, but like they're not doing the first checks, they're doing the follow-ons, right? So I think it really takes a long time to have that kind of cycle move.
But that cycle, do you even see that cycling happen? Because I feel like, I've been doing this since 2010, so it's 11 years. Those people that you mentioned, I don't think are actually writing those checks in the way that you're saying that they are in other areas.
No, I was just going to say that. So that generation never came into this world, right? Like they stay doing, and a lot of them done great things for this community for sure, like full stop.
But old school style stuff.
That's right.
Real estate plays, like, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and what they've done is small. So I was meeting, with Jerry Miller the other day, and so what he's super into this, and so is a couple of other people like Dreyfus and some others, right? There are people that are investing in these higher tech companies. The challenge that we have is scale. So we don't have a lot, right? So even if you look at 7x7, the Lighthouse, like they're not just pulling, which I've always said they shouldn't have, because you can't just work, focus on local teams. But they're now expanding and getting deal flow from other areas, right? Like I'm talking to teams that are in Richmond, but they're really in Seattle, and I'm talking, the customers are going to be in Seattle or whatever. And so or Boston. And I think that's great. The fact that those teams are starting to find value to come here, I think is critical. And so I think that the life cycle and that sort of, whatever you want to call it, the feedback loop or whatever we want to use, it takes time. And so that's something that when you talk about like having capital, that's been something I've been really trying to push people's buttons on. There are people doing it. There's not a lot. Certainly there isn't enough capital, period. But we also can't just assume that the teams are going to come here. So I think we've got 2 challenges that, I continue to try to have conversation about, which is we need to circle the troops, get as much money off the sideline as we possibly can here. And there's got to be new ways of doing that versus the only the existing structures. But to do that, we also have to define who the hell we are. And this is something that Hampton Roads has really struggled with, at least in our world, right?
Water.
Not from the shipbuilding world, not from the whatever world. Like
Yeah.
those people know why the military contracting, like that's very clear, right? But when it comes to all these other elements that we talk about, early stage, let's say, software enabled technology, because I do hardware as well, but let's say software is the kind of unique component versus like ship hulls, right? Or like wind turbines. I think that there's just not even remotely enough of a pull effect right now, because our messaging is all horizontal. It's just stage early.
But why not?
Right?
Why not double down on those things that are all around water, right? The tourism, military ports, those are all three based on water. There's all technology in that. Like, why not play in there and deep dive into that? Because I do think that we never talk about water, right? And then even if you're talking about something in the water from a Pharrell perspective, tourism, like I do feel like water is that thing that you can do. The beer scene, right? Everything has to do with water. Feel like you can pull stuff out of that market around that, and you would have that pulse that you're looking for and still have ties to an area that other places don't have. But it sounds like
sure, and you do have to go deeper. So there's four areas that I've kind of identified, and for Hampton Roads, and they're different in Richmond. But my perspective is it's going to have to be port and logistics, because we have some real strength there, and that's a vertical that makes sense. We already have logistics accelerators at Brinc, around the world, and there's lots of different governments and corporates that have talked to us about doing more in this space. I think that's a logical one. I think kind of health. I didn't know this at first. I thought this was going to be a Richmond strength, but I didn't know how strong Centera and EVMS really were. And I've been very impressed the more I've learned and the work that Kevin and the team is doing. Like, I think, you'll be surprised in a year to 2 years what they do. I think that's going to be really impressive. And we hope to be a big part of that. And they're starting to work with 757 a little bit too. So I think, the health side and medical side. The third, I think, is something that I did not know, but I love this because we are the world's first drone accelerator program. We did that with DJI overseas, and they thought we were too early, but we proved that we've got a lot of deal flow. Not drones in particular, but autonomous systems. So when you look at what's going on at NASA and Jefferson, and there's something very interesting that, again, would not have dawned on me, but when I think about the type of talent that we have in the military that comes out of NASA that is connected to the intelligence communities, there's something that I think could be really interesting there. That plays
into unmanned aerial systems or something like that?
Autonomous systems in general. It touches on a lot of things. We've had lots of investments in air, water, ground, autonomous robots, etc. But so that's one. And then the other one that's a harder nut to crack, but that touches on what you were saying a little bit. So Brinc, my business, we've been powering and backing the Rise Resilience Accelerator for the last program or challenge for the last 2 call outs. So, we're actually about to just launch a $3 million challenge with them for rural and urban climate or coastal city resilience. And there's some element that's, I don't think the positioning's right, but let's just use the word resilience for now, because it's the language we have. And that's more than just water. It's a part water, but it's also part, electricity and having that, which is going to play into the Dominion offshore, wind energy, which is actually way more important than I thought it was. Like, I didn't know that in America, we don't have this industry. And so that's actually amazing that, Hampton Roads has a shot at that. And so I think that these verticals all have amazing for-profit opportunities that young startups would love to come participate in. But, we've had this constant struggle of, what's our narrative and what's our brand, playing well together, as you all were talking about. And so that's been one sort of the antagonistic, whatever you want to use it, like instigator roles I've been trying to play for the last year and a half. Is just like pressing on this button and saying, look, we have literally built, 15 accelerators in 9 cities and countries around the world. We are scaling to a huge scale. Like, we'll go to 60 or 65 accelerators in 25 countries, over the next 5 years. And I personally was doing that groundwork. Like, I was in the air 200 days a year. So I've been going to 25 countries a year on average, to go help find these deals, open these markets, see what's up. And we have opportunity. We really do. I wouldn't say that. And personally, it's like, I'm sure you all know all the kind of shticks, but I always find it's interesting when you look to invest in founders, like they need to have personal experience or like just be obsessed with a problem, right? Like, it can't be a nice to have, and I can't kick the fact that there's something here. And this is on top of all my other work that has nothing to do with this area, right? And so I continually find myself coming back to do these types of podcasts, to have these meetings, to talk to these founders. I just think like there's something here. I haven't cracked it. I don't know the answer yet, but I have a sense that it's thematic, it's vertical, and it's for profit. and those are some of the areas that I think we should focus on.
And to circle back around in terms of bringing a lot of this together, the other issue that we have with all this grant funding and not-for-profit stuff is that all this money has timelines, and they want to put timelines on how fast these businesses need to be, to one, attract them, two, to grow them to get the return that they need. And it's like, we're trying to mash these two things together. You can't put a timeline on growing these businesses, or else the funding's going to run out. And then reporting on everything with all the grant funding and everything else, it's just things they have to happen in their own timeline.
It has to be more patient. And I think I've only heard Venture South ever say it explicitly, although I'm sure there's some other structures, but they said, look, we're very honest. Like when we give you money, we want it back in 5 years or 4 years or whatever the number is. And certainly you can always punch out in the next round. You can do a secondary. So there's ways to get your money back, but like, at least in the world I'm from, that's not common, right? Like it's sort of 10 years as your minimum horizon, right? And it's actually crept up to now kind of 12 and 15. And I think that there's a lot of new technologies, especially in DeFi and Web 3.0, that we're looking at to help create liquidity earlier, which may help, increase the risk capital that comes into this market, which may help this community. but to flip it on its head, which this is something I've struggled with, is even with those themes, like let's say I want to build an accelerator or fund in one of those themes, which is our normal model. We build accelerator programs backed by a fund, so there's continuity of capital. There's usually, you got to have 3 checks. It's sort of like the minimum. You've got to have that first, which is usually, friends and family plus an accelerator or whatever, and 757 and Lighthouse and all that can come in there, and then or within that relatively similar time frame. Then you need that follow-on check, which is like, cool, we now know kind of what we're doing. We need to spend some money to push it, and then you need we actually know what we're doing now. It's time to like finish it, right? Like finish R&D, get your first paid proof of concept or pilot program, whatever it is, start generating revenue. And so it's not always that way, but it's something like that. It's 2 to 3 checks in the first, give or take, let's say 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is. Some teams go faster or slower, but like, let's say it's an average. And if you don't have that continuity of capital, which we realized the hard way, Y Combinator took a decade to figure this out. It took them 10 years to raise their first follow-on fund. Or I think they call it the actually it might be continuity fund. I forget the word, but whatever it is, $1 billion. And so on our experience, we started raising our first fund, 3-4 years in, because we realized we didn't want to wait that long. And as you see these teams get that first check, friends and family, let's say it's NRV or it's, right, whatever there's a group I just talked about in the South, I forget already. But the point is they're vulnerable because now they're not in an ecosystem, right? And this is around the world, not just Hampton Roads. When you're not in a mature risk capital ecosystem, then those teams now are at high risk. So they could have the best tech, they can have the best team, everything could be right, but they are physically not in a place where there are enough shots on goal. We always tell our teams you're going to pitch 100 times, to raise every round. It's not always that, but it's kind of an average. And so
this is getting at the area does matter type of thing. Because you have to have those shots.
Yeah, you have to. There's no way around it, right? Like you cannot. Happy to be wrong in this, but like, show me 25 companies that raised every dollar they needed in Hampton Roads. Like I think you'd be hard pressed.
So that's why people need to go to other areas historically, maybe even
right. Now. And so then this is the theory that I've been trying to figure out, which I'm happy to say it publicly because I need help and I don't know all the answers for this. Is so. I feel good that I have the access and I've got enough positive feedback that people will back me in these verticals, right? To bring Brinc to Hampton Roads, totally possible. And I also think the people on the ground that want this type of innovation to some extent will back those verticals, right? Might be a little hard because some of those are government, but like you can get enough done, I think, where you could create a really good reason to come. And that's something that, we do professionally. And I always think it's a little funny looking backwards because Y Combinator sourcing companies of the Valley, from in the early days, that wasn't that hard of a sell, right? The Valley was already the hottest place on earth to be, right? So that was like full stop. Didn't really matter. It was obviously early. They were the first to build this whole model, Paul and Jessica. But it's like that was a no-brainer, right? Now flip it, and then you look what we've done. We built our first office in Hong Kong, and then it was Guangzhou, China, and then it was Bahrain, and then it was Poznan, Poland, not even Warsaw, like, Poznan. And then it was Kochi, India, not Mumbai, then we did Sydney, Australia. Then we did Dubai, Singapore, Barcelona, like, places that like logically someone from London, New York, wherever, Toronto, San Francisco, they're not thinking like, oh, I have to go to these cities to do my job, right? Or build my business, right? So we've been doing this successfully for a long time. And it's because we feel very confident in the value proposition, what I call it the magnet. Like, why are you going to go to a program? Why are you going to go start either a legal entity or look at that market for customers or follow on capital or even an M&A opportunity or whatever it might be, or grants? There's lots of good grants overseas for teams. You don't have to physically be there to get them. So why would you do that? And so that's the kind of question, I'm flipping the script here to Hampton Roads and saying the same thing. Like, I think building that narrative in all those verticals whereby, even a company from New York City, right? Or if we talk about, resilience, the Netherlands, right? Or we're talking about the port, we can talk about, Antwerp or Belgium somewhere, or Haifa in Israel. Why would these companies say, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing, or I think this makes sense. Why am I going to come there? And I know it's digital now with COVID, but eventually it won't be. And, the proposition of that soft landing and support they need and the true stuff that we're going to give them, right, to come do their best work here, it has to be created, that value proposition. And then the hardest part, which is the part I'm struggling the most with, is the money. So I feel confident you can get the early parts of this capital, right? Like, you can put a little bit of money to work. The problem is that the fund sizes in this region are minuscule. So like, I think there's been a couple of funds that are like 25 million or something like that, in from like below DC, right? I'm sure most of you would understand, and if founders are listening, you don't understand this. This is always something I try to push people on is, if you're going to raise capital from, anyone in the venture capital community, it really is important that you understand the basic economics of how venture capital works, because you're learning about your job usually in your business and as a founder, but you aren't thinking about the job of the person giving you the cash, because they're not a bank. It's, different and well, same, but different. And so the reason I bring that up is $25 million like can barely support 2 to 3 staff, right? It's a rounding error in terms of capital. And so it sounds like so much in this region, but I've been pushing everyone to say, like, look, if we're not talking about $100 million per vertical, like, it's a non-starter. And it doesn't mean you can't get started, but it is so hard to create enough momentum and to build enough of a magnet. So by definition, that means we can't raise all the capital here, which is where I'm struggling, right? Is I feel confident you could probably get enough smart business people and people that care about Hampton Roads to pony up a good amount of cash, not hundreds of millions per vertical, but a good amount of millions. The problem with that is that we're going to have to match it with other outside capital. And that means, in a good way, this is the whole crux of the topic, right? I don't think any of the founders on this really give two shits about the problem of Hampton Roads ecosystem building, but like, whoever is listening live, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on what you really care about. But this is the crux of the issue. Can I take a theory, let's just call it the port, right, and logistics, and I can get, let's say, 10, 15, $20 million locally, and then I need to go raise another 80 from somewhere else. Can I convince other people that this is a hot enough of an area and that we can really attract the best talent in this space around the world to come here and give them a place to set up and go? Because if I can't, they're not going to be interested in this deal, right? They're not going to be interested in bringing new capital to Hampton Roads in the risk side of the game. Certainly, we've got plenty of people bringing in stuff for offshore wind, for the hardware side, right? We've got plenty of people coming in for the port and building ships and building bridges and all this other stuff. Like, that's great. That's not what we're talking about, right? Like, we're talking about a different audience. And that part is like the kind of apple that hasn't dropped for me is, can I convince an institutional investor or ultra high net worth or family office and say, look, I need $20, $25 million from you all because I'm going to find the hottest shit logistics and, whatever, maritime, whatever you want to call this, teams. And we're going to give them the best place on earth to do their job and build their businesses. So we'll see how it goes. But like that part's, jury's still out for me.
In your mind, money talks. It sounds like it's the only thing that's missing, right? So you're not concerned that there isn't, a hotbed of previous people that have done the things that you're trying to do. That doesn't bother you in any kind of way. That the advice that they're getting.
We build critical mass where we go. I mean, I don't think that. I think Hampton Roads is an amazing place. I mean, honestly, you all are here. You're not from here, right? And so I think that, like, it's got a stickiness factor to it once you're here. if you given, I think like Tulsa Remote. Have you guys heard about that program?
Is that where they're
I've
paying
not.
people? Yeah.
So they're paying people 10 grand to move to Tulsa for a year, right?
Yeah.
And 10 grand we know is not even covering most people's moving
I
costs.
saw one
right?
today for a place in West Virginia for 12 grand.
There you go.
Yeah, it's.
I really think Hampton Roads should do this. Seriously, I think it's a really smart idea. But they have a big $1 billion family, the Kaiser family, behind that, and so it's a long-term, thoughtful concept, that says, hey, we have to start somewhere, right? And 10 grand, for 10,000 people sounds like a lot of money, but for these types of people, it's not. And out of those 10,000 people, I don't know, a few thousand stay. And out of the few thousand, they're all like super turned on, like, digital workers, right? People that would be willing to do this stuff. And I think that that's where
there's plenty of money wasted in other places too. So it's not in the region where their money is there, whether it's from a government, which obviously I think we're trying to stay away from, but there's plenty of money that's wasted in different ways. Yeah. So
yeah, I always laugh whenever I drive somewhere and I see billboards, I go, if I could only just have the money they spent on billboards. Like,
Right.
like it's so much money, right? But anyways, the reason I bring that up is I think that you can build this ecosystem has enough vibrancy and like Tinder, to go. Like we may need a spark, that to really like light this on fire. But there's stuff going on. And
what would be that spark? Would it be keeping businesses here that if they have a successful Series A that they stay here?
No, you can't do that. That's the last thing you want to do. Like you do not want to. Yeah.
So what do we need to create that spark?
I think the stuff we're talking about, you need a couple, starting with one is fine. You need a vertical and you need to start building a brand, and you need to have money, and you need to have this basic support. So this is, I didn't invent this, right? Techstars had it. Everyone, there's like a model that makes sense, right? It's not like rocket science, but it takes someone to get behind it, which, I've been trying to push as best I can to try to help create something like this. And it's got to be material, right? Like if you're going to I think right now, 757 Lighthouse, they get like 20 or 25 non-dilutive or whatever it is. I mean, like the starting of anything I've ever heard is usually like 50, 80, 100, right? Like that's like the beginning. So like 20 is nothing, right? Like 20 doesn't get you anywhere. And so the dollars have to go up dramatically. We've gone from starting at, $100,000. Now some of our programs start at $500,000 for the first check. And we're just realizing that the needs are changing. And, you can also imagine on the other side that if you want to bring someone here to a place where there's not lots of risk capital and we can't prove, right, that we can like roadshow them away around and like smash their raising targets within, the southern part of the state, then you have to give them more runway. So you have to have more continuity in the first version. You have to have more money available day one. Doesn't mean
when
to
you
give
say
it all to them up front.
757, you're saying 757 accelerate the 12-week
Yeah,
program.
they give like 20. They give like 20.
So do you think that they have zero skin in the game, basically, right? So they have, it's government dollars, right? Half the money is from the government and half is from the wealthiest schools and businesses in the area. So there's no skin in the game. I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. The person markets that they're helping the startup community, and there's no single individual attached to something like that. I mean, fundamentally, it sounds like you're saying that's setting up for failure for not only the ecosystem but also the businesses, because there isn't that next step on it, or there isn't an individual that's willing to go to bat for those things in there. I mean,
I don't know. I don't think that's what I'm saying. Like, first off, the people that work at these groups, like them at Lighthouse, like they work their ass off, right? Like their heart is definitely in the right place, and I think that they're working within the structure they have. And we've had lots of conversations, so this isn't like they wouldn't hear this and think it's new. I've said this to everyone: is there has to be the next thing, the and, right? Like maybe their check size doesn't change. That's fine. 20K to like do some relocation and some basic stuff that's non-dilutive. I'll take that. That sounds great, but you need more, right? And so I think having these sidecar or, additional for-profit structures, right, that are verticalized, I think it has to be vertical. I will never stop saying that. It has to be vertical. And
that means being industry focused is what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So around the 4 themes, let's say we talked about, and there may be.
So if you got 10 companies in the cohort, they're all around the same thing.
It has to be.
And I'm not bashing the people that are associated with these places at all. I'm just saying it sounded like you said there needs to be an individual that goes to bat for these things. If the only thing in town is really this thing, and then an angel group, there needs to be someone individually that's writing a check for that, or something like where.
No, I meant that. So it's not about focusing and supporting those startups, right? They work their butt off and go to bat all the time, doing everything they possibly can. What I was referencing is when you're focusing on a vertical, like if you're going to go, or any of these, right? If you don't like raising $100 million or 25, whatever it is, there's got to be a throat to choke, right? Like if you're going to go take money, they're going to bet on you. They're not betting on what already exists, right? We're talking about a vision that literally is something new, right? It does not exist. So if I'm going to go raise $100 million, these investors could be like, cool, like who's on my shit list when you don't return this capital? It's Bay, right? Got it. It's not, like you said, 757 or a government, right? It's got to be an individual. And so I'm partially an instigator because I think that it needs to happen. I'm also very, also personally interested to try to figure out how to do it. Like I think there's something here that, I would love to, get Brinc involved in. And I've been talking to everyone about it. So I think there's something really interesting here. I just don't know how to, and I'll say it again in case anyone has any ideas, right? How to attract the external capital to say Hampton Roads is one of those emerging, areas, just like Austin was, or Baltimore, or whatever you want to call these other cities that weren't the top right away, or Denver. Like it's possible, and we're going to focus on our strengths. We're going to build a big damn magnet. We are going to give them everything they need to be successful in terms of pilot opportunities, data sets, customers, all the grants known man, all the service providers, all the stuff they need to relocate, like to be capital efficient, like all the stuff, right? And we're going to do it in the places we're strong on, which are these 3 to 4 things, and give me $25 million, right? Like I think that this isn't like a novel pitch, right? Like this is how it's been working kind of since Y Combinator. I just think we've been building version 1, like I said, and people have done a really good job, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears of lessons learned and mistakes, like always. And now it's just more of like, cool, so what's next, right? Like how do we evolve to be the next version?
That's the real scale issue, is what you...
Yeah, it's part of it. Yep.
I want to circle back around to something you were talking about, writing bigger checks for founders. One of the number one questions that I get from founders is, how much money do I ask for? So if someone hears that, oh, you started Brinc writes bigger checks now, I don't want a founder running over to you, Bay, and say, hey, man, I want a check for, $250K. What is your advice to founders in terms of how to determine how much capital they need and how much capital they should raise?
Well, I was just teaching, investing, and mentoring at 757 this week, and I have to say, like I'll push back. I'll use that framing of and more again. So capital is readily available for great teams. So when you leave this region, if you are competitive, actually not competitive regionally, right? Like actually competitive in the kind of national or global landscape, you'll have plenty of money, right? I was talking to a team and they're doing medical tech, no issue. Like as long as you're
every
real,
deal that I've been part of is so oversubscribed right now that there's plenty of money out there. I totally agree with what you're saying.
Right, but then on the other side, like I've been in conversations regularly around here where people are not raising or asking for nearly enough. And that's not like saying, hey, you need $1 million, you ask for 2. It's no, like, they're raising like 100 or, 125 or 175. And it's like, okay, by the time you even raise that, you have to re-raise, right? And by the time like people even start working on writing those checks, like it's not worth the paperwork, right?
$100,000 instead of $1 million.
Yeah. And so it's not that you can't get on with that, right? But I think potentially the conversation needs to be a little bit more audacious. Like I was talking to a founder yesterday from Richmond by way of Seattle, and he was going to ask his first customer bases for $10,000. And I said, okay, let's think about that, right? And this is a customer that's going to essentially like be their first pilot, right? I said, so do you have a sense of how much that person's time is worth sitting on the other side of the table? Like, and I was just giving an example going, when I used to be a professional speaker, like, you could get paid up to 10 grand for an hour, right? Just to talk. And so I said, when you're thinking about someone having to think about even doing due diligence on you and the legal docs just to get you $10,000, I go, it's just not worth even taking your meeting, right? And they had never been told that. And so I immediately said, like, this needs to be $100,000 starting conversation to be a pilot customer of yours, period, full stop. And it was just like, it was just I think it's that kind of local maximum stuff where the founders that are coming from other places, often you'll see them, they're on the right track, right? When you talk to them, they're raising $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever it is. And they're not going to, you don't always need to go to $1 million right away. Like say it's 500 grand, right? That's still material. Then that gives you enough runway to really experiment, right? Like really try versus you're talking about 100, 200K. Yeah, like maybe you can get away with that. Like in some places we invest like in, Jakarta, Indonesia or something, right? Or like Vietnam for salary costs. But like by the time you raise that capital and start deploying, like you're right back at the starting gate again. Like you're raising all over again, right?
That's because 100K is a salary type of thing, and you got
and so that's kind of where I think there's a little bit of that local maximum stuff, which happens in every market, right? Like you kind of hit the ceiling of based on where people around you are working, and it's hard to hold yourself accountable or dream bigger than that, right? And so I think you see the founders that are coming from other places like Boston or other places to here, they've got it, right? And then they're when you look at their decks, you see what they're raising, you're like, yep, this checks out, this makes sense.
And do those people from those areas, are they raising that money here?
Yeah. Oh no, I don't know if they're raising it here. Sorry, I haven't.
So do you think that so those people that you're talking about, those businesses, do you think that they are lowering the bar because they're just trying to get something, because they know that's the check that they can get, and that's the ballpark that they're in? They're in a minor league ballpark, and they can't get that check in a major league, so they're trying to get some sort of win.
That's an interesting point. I have to look in more, because that would be a fair argument, right? If you're building like a mom and pop, like non-scalable startup, then raising 500,000 sounds crazy, right? So I think that's a fair point. I can't speak that directly right now. I have to look.
At least from what I've seen, Zach, is a lot of people don't have a product and they don't have customers and they don't have revenue.
I'm not doubting that, but I just also haven't heard a lot of these checks being written. So maybe the reason that they're going for smaller amounts is because they wanted to get something, and they're just holding on for dear life, and they know they might be able to get something out of a smaller amount.
And if that's the case, and I think it's an important time also in that founders conversation of their kind of business, is to just be honest and have a dialogue, right? Just going, look, this is a non-sustainable path forward.
100% with that, right? Yeah.
Like you're never going to meet your goal of really solving this problem at this kind of scale and pace, and you're going to suffer for a very long time. And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But otherwise, maybe you just need to like take a step left, let this cruise, and put it on freeze or kill it and look at this from a different lens, right? And so I think that conversation may not be happening either. I don't know, but like, I don't know many businesses that you can realistically be raising, 25, 75, 100 in the United States. And get super far. Not to say that, that first accelerator check, that's usually our check, right? But the next check is what I'm talking about. The post friends and family, friends, family, fools, right? Accelerators. That next check, I think it needs to be more in that kind of $250,000 to 500 kind of starting on average. Obviously, a little bit more, a little bit less depending. But yeah, I don't think it's all happening from this market. 757 has a good track record in certain verticals like medical. They put a lot of money to work in health. Like tens of millions of dollars. There are a couple of verticals and some deals you can point at, but I would argue in aggregate, by not focusing, that also makes it harder for angels, right? Because I remember, I'll look at a deal, from Virginia Beach, and there's something that makes total sense here. Like I love this one deal from the last cohort, which was, it's like Uber for military bases, because there's like all these reasons Uber and DoorDash can't be on military bases. And I was like, no brainer. I'm gonna go, total makes sense. Scale as fast as you humanly can, just sell. Like
Chow call, is that what that is?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I was like, that makes so much sense. I hope they're doing well. I haven't talked to the founder in a while, but he seemed like a really good guy. And then another one around like the medical space, like that can work here. It's not the most obvious place to start, but there's enough markets, and I kind of like things that are where people aren't looking. Like that's one of my favorite things, is being in a place and keeping your head down and knowing what right? Not having to get loud about it or being obvious. So I think there's some things that make sense. Whereas, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense in this region, right? Like fashion, right? Or being in fintech. Like there are things that just don't make a ton of sense, right? That you're just in the wrong pool, right? And so not to say that you can't come for 20K, but if you were going to structure something more logically and chronological, where like every next check made sense, there was enough angels that got it, there was enough business professionals that understand this space to be good mentors, like that kind of stuff, I think has to start galvanizing for some of the kind of flywheel to start.
Got a question from Danny Rubin. Good conversation. Thanks, Danny. How can ODU become more of a lab where startups can be born? ODU or just universities in general. How can this era 112,000 students go to school here? a plethora of different higher ed stuff. What can they do to get more startups out?
Well, happy to chat about this too. This is something we've worked on. So a lot of our LPs and big investment partners around the world are in the university space. So I think there's a couple of things, and I've been talking to Graham at William & Mary about this. I think William & Mary, VIMS, ODU. There's a lot of great universities. Howard, Christopher Newport, Norfolk State, which I'll be at tonight. Like there's so many universities, and I think there's a couple of things. Personally, I don't know enough about this, but having incubators on campus is really powerful. We always do these sort of like pre-accelerators, incubator things, non-dilutive, all about the process, all about iteration, doing customer development, all the kind of normal, Founders Institute type stuff, right? So it's all online, but there's something to be said about being in person with this crucible of both space and time, which I think, William & Mary now has this beautiful place, the Entrepreneurship Center, that they finally got. I don't know enough about how ODU does this just yet. But like, that's important to have this constant place where students like myself, when I was there, and this was irritating, that I could go to then exert this energy. Like I would go to the business school and there wasn't an entrepreneurship center. There weren't places for people like me to be hanging out and like in my free time working on this stuff. I've been mentoring a student from ODU for the last few months who hit me up on the Slack channel, and I don't know where that guy or girl goes right on campus to like keep that energy going, right? And then you also have beyond that is how do you engage, which is something else that we also do, is help engage your alumni, because the alumni is where the value really is. And no offense to the professors, like they're all like really good moments in time, but most of them are not in the professional world anymore, right? So they're working on older data, and they can do my professors are great, like full stop. Like I would never say that's like not a benefit, right? But the only one that I had that was in the venture capital community was like 100 years old by the time he was my professor, right? And he was like quasi involved then, right? So I was getting like this very old school concept of venture capital that like wasn't actually really what I was interested in. And so what you need to do is you need to figure out how to engage the alumni. And I don't know about you all, but the only way most of the alumni, or I always get asked, is to send a check, right? Like that's the only way that anyone ever gets me involved. Sometimes you get like, do the homecoming, whatever, but that's not the most valuable thing that we offer, right? The most valuable thing that we offer is our time, our experience, our platforms, access, and you have to ask people for more. And that's something that I think a lot of the development offices on campuses have a hard time and struggle with. And I know William & Mary best because I constantly am poking the bear and like, yelling at him about stuff. And I think Graham's done a fantastic job with what he's got, what he's been given. And I think that all the other universities, which I'm happy to talk to anyone from any of these universities if you'd like, because we have certain plug and play services and models, but there's also stuff that has to be built custom. But you've got to do both. You've got to
is the Graham the missing piece at a university then? In that case, it's like, because I think most schools are building these things, whether it's a room in on campus somewhere. There, I think almost every university locally has something like that, but most of them, to my understanding, don't have a Graham, someone who within 5 years removed has sold a business, been in those shoes, has done that thing. Like, is that the missing piece? And that's really what they should try to pull in.
It seems like that was at William & Mary. Things definitely, and he didn't have the speed or velocity that he wanted at first either, right? It was a slow burn. And then once it got to the president and left the business, school, which is where they were sort of incubated at first, and then he got a remit from the new president to go campus wide, that's when the afterburners turned on. So I would say it's kind of like the same thing if you look at any corporate, like we work with corporate partners all over the world, right? Like in the US, you work with Manulife on InsurTech, we work with Schneider Electric on clean energy, like you can, I'll keep going down the list. But I won't even talk to a corporate unless I see that they have 3 to 5 hires with an innovation title, because what's the point? Like you put no money to work, right? Like you clearly don't think it's important. So real estate is cheap. Everyone has real estate. Universities in particular have lots of real estate. And like a donor to put a name on a wall and and get some free content online. Like that's not it, right? Like you definitely need like the heart and soul of a place is usually a person. Like if you look at an Evans at 757, or you look at Graham at William & Mary, or Somaya at University of Richmond, like there's people that are like the heart, right? Like the people. And it takes time, and usually they get burned out, right? Because it's not a very thankful job, and I think that brings in the second piece, which is the alumni. So once you get that person, you really do need to think about how to engage the alumni better. Like for me, this is the first time, coming back to William & Mary for homecoming in a long time. And I was freaking pumped. I was at, the university or the entrepreneurship center. And I was like, listen to this great entrepreneur from William Mary who just sold his last business for $100 million. And he started this new thing. And then I'm like looking at the speaker series going like, holy shit, like one of the co-founders of Hulu is a William Mary, grad. I'm like, who knew? And like, you're like going through this stuff. And I'm like, okay, like every time I come to town, where am I going to go? I'm going there. Like, I'm not going to the business school. I'm not going to anywhere, but I'm just going to sit there and like co-work and talk to students and like roll up my sleeves. Right. And so I think certainly a person is a part of it, but I don't think a person without the support of, let's say, the provost, the president, whoever the boss at the very top is, not a university, a department, the top, like unless they're in, which by the way, any of their donors, right, could literally like burn this money tomorrow and not care, right? It is not material to a lot of their big donors. And then the benefit that you get by doing that is crazy. So, any presidents of any schools in Hampton Roads that want to talk, Bay at Brinc.io. I'm happy to have this conversation.
Man.
Tim, any last questions?
Well, no, it's always interesting when we do these. Yeah, I have a ton of questions, and then conversations always go different ways, and didn't get to several of them, but I definitely appreciate the time and the knowledge bombs that Bay drops.
Well, I'm happy to do a follow-up, honestly. Like, I think the thing that I can say best, like I don't have all the time in the world. Like, I'm obviously a little busy, but I think that I'm happy to do a few things, right? Any Bay at Brinc.io, if you all want to reach out to me, I have a Calendly link you can share out. Like, I don't mind people reaching out and trying to get in my calendar and trying to help. Like, I have a lot of love and a lot of energy to try to help figure this out. And I don't want ever for anyone to think that, we don't have it going on. We've got a lot going on. We have a lot of stuff going in our favor. And I think today we talked about a lot of the opportunities. I'm not so interested, or I'm not interested, like, honestly, who's even listening and whether they care about any of that. But I think that there's a lot that we can do. And I think there's a lot of people that are at least open to having this conversation now. And I think that it's sort of incumbent on, all of us on this call and others, right, that are saying, like, I always call it the coalition of the willing. It's like, cool. Like, let's just appreciate that we are where we are, right? That's all my living in beta stuff personally. It's like, accept that you are where you are today. That's it. Like, you look like you look, you are the weight you are, you have the money in the bank that you have your title, like that is it. You're living in the apartment you're living in, that's it. Now it's about what are we going to do about it, right? And I think that there's, that's kind of the people I'm trying to work with. So if anyone is listening, that is genuinely fired up to help build version 2, like I'm doing everything I can. I don't have all, I can't dedicate 100% of my time to doing this, but there's something here. It matters. I think we all have a lot of love for this place. And I'm excited to try to help. So, feel free to reach out.
It's awesome.
It's been wonderful. Glad that you're able to get back into the ocean without a shark attacking you. And I use that word loosely as attack. We'll end it the way that we started it. But no wrestling videos to end it. Just a picture of that guy right there.
Nice.
Bay, appreciate it. Looking forward to meeting in person at some point. And thank you all for listening. See you guys next Thursday. Peace.
So long.
See y'all.